for some reason, a white.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine. Can you hear us?
Perfect.
Excellent. There's a little bit of a lag on this video, but we can hear you just great. So,
You're sort of frozen.
Just when you said it,
yeah,
right?
I know. Jim, this is, I will just, I think we hear you fine. It'll just be important that you kind of get close to the microphone when you want to speak and just wave at me if I miss you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you to this Thursday, November 2nd, meeting of the Destination Medical Center Board Corporation. We have a full agenda today, and I want to welcome everybody who is here today from the community and from the city and the county, and I'm looking forward to this meeting very much. The first item, I will just quickly do a call of the roll. Mayor Ryback.
Here.
Commissioner Beer.
Present.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Doherty, I believe, is on his way and isn't here quite yet. We'll note when he arrives. Councilmember Hickey.
Here.
Ms. Ronnie.
Here.
Excellent. Mayor Brady is unable to be here today. I'll talk about that in just a little bit of a second. First item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from July 27th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion of the agenda? Excuse me, the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. Next item on our agenda is the public comment period, which we traditionally have, and I would like to invite anyone in the audience to speak, and I would ask folks who would like to speak to please offer their first and last name. And I also would like to ask you to please keep your minutes, your comments to 2 minutes or less so that we have an opportunity to hear from as many people as want to come forward. And thank you very much. Good morning.
Hi, Paula Harden. Councilmember Nick Campion called the housing crisis in Rochester a market failure at a committee of the whole meeting. Rochester needs 1,400 affordable, accessible units now, but the builders won't build. DMC plans to expand the workforce by 20 to 30,000 people, but no proposed workforce housing gets a mention. This housing needs to be in place for people now and to be here for the workers in the near future. Rochester is no beggar. If developers don't want to build affordable housing, then fine. They don't need to build anything. Other builders will be willing to build affordable housing and be grateful for a 20% profit or $100 per square foot instead of $250 per square foot before it's worth their time and bother. Right now, Rochester settles too cheaply with TIF money, only even asking for 20% of the union units to be designated affordable. We need 100% affordable. The beauty of affordable, like the beauty of accessible, is that everyone can live in them, which is to say that if we have an excess of affordable and accessible housing, which is unlikely, even the high earners could afford them. This means there would be no cumbersome 20-year monitoring and means testing and so on for people to be able to rent units because there would be enough. The housing crisis requires home ownership. Owner-occupied and conditionally only owner-occupied housing for the missing middle, such as condos, townhomes, tiny homes, cluster housing, single-family dwellings, mobile homes, prefab homes, all that and more can be built under Rochester zoning. The DMC EDA mission includes seeking financial support for DMC, the city, and projects. The EDA has a duty to facilitate private investment. Please utilize the DMC EDA to form a sub-entity cooperative dedicated to providing bargaining power for lower cost materials and supplies, allowing even greater leveraging of DMC resources to support private builders who agree to provide 100% affordable housing from rentals to single-family dwellings. With the power and economic leverage of the DMC EDA behind such a cooperative, additional financial instruments and benefits could be provided to developers.
Thank you.
That would directly access people and make the city and council joint development effort.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Candace Rasmussen. I'm a resident here in Rochester, and I'm a retired public defender and legal services lawyer. And as such, I've had the privilege to volunteer on the landlord-tenant hotline for legal aid of Olmsted County. And starting last summer, and the hotline helps tenants who are facing troubles. And starting last summer, I started getting calls from people who were losing their homes because their homes were being torn down. And not their homes, but also their apartments. Mostly it's people who are really poor and have no place to live because their income is so low. And I started trying to help some of these folks and hit a wall. Called the city. No, there's no relocation benefits. Never heard of such a thing. And did a little bit of research and discovered that DMC funding and you folks as DMC board members have the authority to provide relocation benefits under the statute and the law. I wonder, I was looking at your materials. I suppose I should talk into this. I was looking at your materials for this meeting. Did you notice that 40% of the people in DMC, of the households in DMC, earn less than $25,000 a year? That's twice as high as the city of Rochester and the county of Rochester. 20% of the people that are living now in this DMC map area that you guys have created are below the poverty level. If you earn $25,000 a year and you spend 30% of your income, which is considered affordable, on rent and utilities, your rent and utilities should be less than $650 a month. Right now, these builders are building apartments and with so-called affordable housing for the people, presumably some of whom are ones who have lost their housing because it's been torn down.
Thank you.
And they call affordable housing $1,000 a month, and that doesn't pay for electricity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to just welcome everybody who wants to speak forward, but I also would like to say that if not today, then sometime shortly, I would be very happy to meet with you all and talk about this. Ironically, I was planning on raising this myself in my chair's report. So I want to just offer that up to everybody. Thank you very much.
I would love that. I appreciate your interest.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who'd like to make a public comment?
Hi, everybody. Glad to see so many people here today.
Good morning.
My name is Nancy Adams. I've lived in Rochester since 2003. Obviously, I'm from the lower Midwest, but I escaped. Anyhow, I'm a voter, taxpayer, activist, and a concerned citizen here in Rochester. I feel like I was living in a bubble my first few years here. It wasn't until I met a really special young man who rides his bicycle everywhere that I realized there were a lot of homeless people in Rochester. We need to do something to provide homes. There's people that are getting close to, paycheck to paycheck where they have a place to live. And according to the DMC Development Plan, adopted per the legislation to support Mayo Clinic's development plans, market rate, workforce, senior, and low-income housing are all needed within the medical development district. It is estimated that 2,200 to 3,100 units of for sale and for rent housing would be needed. That's a lot in the DMC development district. The DMC Development District should contain a range of housing types. For sale, multifamily, for rent, multifamily, high-rise, duplexes, and townhomes. Inclusionary zoning or housing development incentives will be needed to ensure a housing mix that includes affordable and workforce units, as well as market rate. The creation of a series of vibrant downtown residential neighborhoods is integral to realizing the vision for a livable city. A key strategy to this plan is to intermix market rate housing with affordable units to accommodate the needs of Rochester's growing workforce, low-income, and senior communities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
If I could, I can see that we have quite a few people here today that are concerned about affordable housing, which I very much appreciate. If I could just ask if there is maybe, after this next speaker, if there is maybe, I don't know, one more person maybe who would like to speak, and then I'm going to bring the public comment period to a close with the pledge that I would be very, very happy to get together with those of you who are advocating for affordable housing very shortly. Thank you so much. Welcome. Excuse me, I have another person here who's at the microphone. Thank you very much.
Richard Olin, Shoreview, Minnesota. You know I've spoken in the past for elevated transit, and I just wanted to put up one slide that shows some of the concerns I have. I've read the 4 pages of the report from SRF that regards transit, and I don't believe these items have been addressed. We need direct access for elderly and disabled people from hospitals and clinics to get on transit. They can't walk across a street in a snowbank to get to the transit. It needs to be easily expandable for Rochester and Minneapolis airports. And it should be capacity on demand, not schedule, so that the schedules will vary depending on the demand. And the different types of riders are really not addressed in this. Medical workers need different capacity, different access than patients do, and you can see the list of people that I've categorized. And finally, we should be controlling the environment. So first, it's safe for everybody to use, but also out of the weather. And I don't see any indication that that's been addressed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Steve Mason, and I'm a resident. Been here since 2003. I'm in the community doing a lot of things. I paint pictures and give them to different churches and organizations just because. I'm a part of the CURE organization, and I'm here to just talk about the taxpayers of Rochester and Minnesota has given Mayo and the DMC $585 million. How much of that money has been used to build truly affordable housing? Communities United for Rochester Empowerment approached the CEO of Mayo Clinic with a request for him to meet in the community about the housing crisis. It has been 2 weeks and we have not received a response. What will the DMC board do to facilitate a meeting between CURE and Dr. Noseworthy? Mayo and DMC have displaced many low-income families and people with disabilities with the development at Discovery Square. Instead of celebrating Discovery Square this afternoon with a ribbon-cutting ceremony, Mayo and DMC should be working with the community to help those have been displaced and are struggling with housing. Now is not the time to be celebrating and patting yourselves on the back. We are facing a housing crisis across Rochester and Mayo, and DMC should be playing a leadership role in solving this. Thank you
Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to close the public comment period, and
I wanted to speak. I'm a taxpayer too.
I'm going
It's
to,
going to be very brief.
okay, all right. Just let us know who you are, please.
Yes. Good morning, members of the board, residents here, everyone else present. My name's Chet Lopez. I'm a community organizer at CURE, which is Communities United for Rochester Empowerment. I'm a taxpayer, a worker, parent, voter here in Rochester. The 2016-2020 Housing Framework Study commissioned by Olmsted County and Rochester Area Foundation calls for the DMC to contribute $5 million per year over 5 years, which is $25 million total in addition to the $60 million needed from Mayo and other employers to meet the community's housing needs. We call on the DMC today to commit to doing part of the contributing the $25 million over 5 years. We call on the DMC board to publicly support CURE's plan for affordable housing at the Rochester City Council, which would require all projects receiving TIF to include at least 20% affordable housing based on 30% area median income. In other words, affordable to people working full-time on minimum wage.
Thank you very much.
It is important when we talk about affordable housing, we look at who can afford housing at the different wage incomes. What is currently being considered affordable would only be obtained to a person earning $20 or more. The current reality is that many residents in Rochester would not be able to afford 60% area median income. For example, someone earning minimum wage would have to work 80 hours a week to live in these apartments. This would intentionally exclude about 1/3 of the city's population.
Thank you very much.
And I have a chart here
Please,
that
if you'd like
explains
to
this.
pass that around to our board, we would welcome having a chance to see it, and I'll follow up with you after this meeting.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Colleagues, next item on our agenda is the chair's report, and I'd like to just talk with you about a few things at the end of this year, 2017. The first is I want to just acknowledge and note that our colleague Susan Ronnie has let me know that she intends to resign from the DMCC board. So this will be Susan's last meeting, I think. And Susan was one of our founding board members appointed by Governor Dayton, and she has brought you have brought such an important perspective to our board as a businesswoman, as a civic leader, and as a transportation expert also. And so we're very grateful for your service and your many contributions. And in your board packet, colleagues, there's a Resolution A. We should have come up with the fabulous Susan resolution name rather than Resolution A, which commends you, Susan, for your service to Rochester and to the Destination Medical Center project, and recognizes your engagement and your commitment to this project. And I want to just thank you personally for everything that you have done and tell you that we will miss you.
Thank you. I just want to say a few words, if I may. Thank you. It's been my privilege and honor to have been included in this very exciting economic development here in Rochester. I want to thank my colleagues here on the board, Mayo Clinic, and the City of Rochester, and most of all, a number of citizens that have come up to me to have various conversations, very thoughtful conversations about what you like and what you want to see about the City of Rochester, especially the minority-owned businesses, and also small businesses, and around the state, in fact. So again, I want to thank the board for the opportunity, Governor Dayton and Lieutenant Governor, and I look forward to seeing Rochester become the world destination medical center that it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yay, Susan. Okay, so would anybody like to offer Resolution A?
So moved.
amending- Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on the resolution? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you. The next thing I want to just note is our beloved colleague, Mayor Brady, is not with us today. Some of you may know that he is recovering from double knee replacement. And I spoke with him last night, and he sounded exactly like himself, a little hemmed in by his current lack of mobility, but very sorry to miss this board meeting and also the groundbreaking that we're going to be doing later today. So he sounded great, and I know we'll all look forward to seeing him soon, but I wanted to just note that. I also wanted to take a moment to welcome Rochester's new city administrator, Steve Reimer, to our first, I think it's the first time that you've been at our board meeting, that we've met this first time in person, though we've been on the phone several times, so we're looking very much forward to working with you. Thank you very much. And I also want to note that some of you may know that Assistant City Manager Gary Newman plans to retire in the first quarter of 2018, so this may be the last official meeting that he attends, though I'm not sure. So Gary, we pledge to not embarrass you at this meeting by recognizing your many contributions if you promise to come back in March so that we can do it then. In all honesty, I can think of no one who's been more central to the creation and the success of this project than Gary. So it's hard to imagine working on this without you, but we'll talk more about that in March. I also just want to take a moment, colleagues, to sort of think about where we are at the end of 2017. You know, last year, I suggested that 2017 would be about marketing, metrics, and momentum. We were moving from a planning phase into an implementation phase. And our board's clear strategy was that we ought to be focused very strongly on transportation, heart of the city, and also Discovery Square. 3 places where we knew it was important to make progress in 2017. It's with these goals in mind, I think it is fitting that later today we'll gather to celebrate the groundbreaking of Discovery Square. We'll hear more about that project later in this meeting, but I think it represents significant momentum and progress towards our goal of diversifying the Rochester economy and creating increased collaboration and opportunity between the science and technology and innovation of Mayo Clinic and the new generation of entrepreneurs in Minnesota. So I'm very excited about that. I think another key point where we have reached an important milestone and shows good momentum is the milestone of reaching $200 million in private investment, which we reached earlier this year. I note, though, that in your board packet there is a list of projects that are either recently completed or in the pipeline or already started. And those projects, 20 of them in total, add up to $700 million in investment. Now, we know that not all of those will come to fruition. Others will full in to take their place. But this is a sign, I think, that this strategy is working. And I also want to note that not all of these projects require any sort of public participation, which I think is a very good thing also. So that is, I think, just a great sign of momentum. Later in this agenda, we're going to talk just briefly about transportation, which is another area where we said we needed strong momentum. This has been a very complicated, detailed planning process led by the city. You know, routes and parking and traffic demand, multiple target markets, including commuters and visitors, and then circulation within the district. And we all know, I think, that we need a transportation system for the development district that, in fact, works for the whole city and the whole region. And we need a plan that is adaptable to changing technology, including autonomous vehicles, and that is realistic and works for people and that is affordable. None of us around this table are transportation planners, though RT sometimes plays one on TV. Seriously, we have been really, I know we're all really grateful for your insight and your analysis.
Excruciating detail.
Yeah. But this is going to be a significant decision point for our board, and of course also the county board and the city of Rochester in terms of how we move forward next year. So stay tuned for that, but a very important point for us. I also want to just note that we asked the EDA to focus quite a bit on metrics and measuring our success. And I refer you to, in our board packet, some good work that the EDA has done to help us, give us the information we need to assess whether this strategy is working and whether what we're doing is working. And there are 2 pieces to it. One is sort of the high-level dashboard, and the second is a more detailed look at many, many other community measures. I want to thank you for that work, and I know that our board is going to want to continue to focus on that because we want not just sort of glowing words, but we want evidence that what we're doing is working. So I want to just close this by saying that I know in 2018 we are going to have some really important decisions to make, certainly the transportation direction, how to bring life to heart of the city and other parts of the public realm strategy that we have. I would suggest that in 2018 we ought to pay particular attention to 2 things. The first is our goal number 5, which talks about how do we achieve the highest quality experience for patients and companions and visitors and employees and residents. The EDA and Mayo are working on that, but I suggest that for us this year, as we move into this phase of implementation, doing that really well is going to be extremely important. And then the other thing I wanted to bring your attention to is housing. So it is apt that we had, although there was no coordination here, it's apt that you are all here today to talk about that. I learned a couple of days, or I didn't learn, but I was reminded a couple of days ago that the vacancy rate in Rochester hovers at around 1.5%. Rest of the state is about 3%, and it's considered a healthy market would be about 5%. So this is a significant issue for the community and also really important to the success of our project, because to be successful, we need people with places to live who can do the work that is being created by this economic development project. So I would suggest to my colleagues that, though this isn't a specific part of our mission given to us by the legislature, that it is essential to the success of this project to be thinking about the issues of housing, and especially affordable housing for the people who work in the district. So I want to just close by thanking you all so much for the work that you've done this year. We have a big agenda ahead of us, and so our work for this year isn't done yet, but thank you so much, all of you, for your commitment to this work. Great. The next item on our agenda is the EDA report, yes? Oh, project updates, thank you. Welcome, come forward.
We have your team in front of you. Madam Chair and members of the board, thank you very much for the opportunity to give this report. We're actually quite excited to share this update, and we'll share the update on 2 fronts. We'll share an update on project updates as well as public realm updates. We have our city colleagues with us as well. And so I'm going to turn it over to Patrick and Terry and Gary mostly to start on the status of the projects that have received prior approval.
Great, thank you. So Terry, I'll kick this off and you can add color commentary as appropriate. The Lieutenant Governor Chair mentioned the 19 plus projects that are in the works, which are indicated on this map. We have tried to color code those projects that have been officially approved by the DMCC for its support, and those are the brief report we'll provide this morning, and it's a good news report on all of these projects and the progress they're making. I'll go in order of the sequence in which you have approved them and spend a moment on each. I will say that we have representatives from each of the projects in the room, and should you have any questions of them, they would be happy to come to the front. But Mark Steggy and Brian Moser from Titan are here. They represent this project, known as the Titan Hilton Hotel on Broadway. This is the first project that you approved for support. It broke ground in December of 2016, so just about a year ago. Just to remind you, it is a mixed-use building, largely a hotel, but also includes additional parking, municipal parking. So this will help achieve both objectives around visitors to our city as well as people who are coming here and need access to parking. It's a $125 million project, and you have seen it coming up out of the ground, and today they're actually pouring the concrete on the 11th floor. So they are moving very quickly with the concrete pour, and they expect to have all of the floors poured by the middle of January. And they will be installing temporary roofing so they can do interior work throughout the winter. There are 120 people working there today. And at the height of the project, which is early in the first quarter of 2018, there will be more than 300 workers on site.
Patrick, if I may add on to what you just mentioned, just to let the board members know, Construction on the parking ramp number 6, which is directly east of the Hilton project, is moving along well. As far as I know, we're still on schedule with having that project completed in August of 2018. And also, just to let you know, as you may recall, as part of that project, we had discussed, actually, the council had the forethought to go out for bids and put in the structural support to allow for additional development on top of the ramp. We did have an RFP out there. The deadline for submittals was about a month and a half ago. We didn't get any submittals, which sort of surprised me, but subsequently we've had a couple of one-off requests. I think city staff has determined it's probably best to just wait a little while, come back with an RFP and bring it out there so that everyone has a fair shot at it again, rather than entertaining these one-off proposals. So that's something to kind of keep in the back of our minds as that project continues its construction as well.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Assuming there's no further questions or no questions, the next project that you were involved with is by Lattice LLC. This is a 347 unit apartment building. If you came in today on 2nd Street, you would have noticed that demolition has already begun, pollution remediation has taken place. It will add, as I said, 347 apartment units to our marketplace, which is important, as you mentioned, Lieutenant Governor. The shortage of housing in our community is in part what putting pressure on prices. So as we grow the number of housing units, we hope to decompress some of that price pressure. Financing is secured. This has happened since your July meeting, so this is another progress that's taken place with closing in mid-December. Site work, as I mentioned, is underway, and official groundbreaking in mid-December. Again, representatives from the project are here, Bob Lux and Chris Osmondson.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for your work on this project.
Urban on First, this is a project that is a collaboration between Titan and Opus. This is in the Discovery Square district, so again, as we have described Discovery Square as a live-work environment, this is adding to our housing density and housing capacity in the downtown, 156 market rate rental units, capital investment of $38 million. Their entitlements are complete, finalizing permitting with the idea of groundbreaking in mid-January. And in this case, again, the financing has been secured, but for the final closure documents. There is a report about that in your packet, correspondence from Matt Roundhorse of Opus providing detail about that per your request.
Good. Thank you. Any questions on that, folks? Good.
And finally, as you all know, the Mortensen project is about to break ground today. It is the first new life science building in the Discovery Square district. A year ago today, Jeremy Jacobs, who I believe is here as well and can respond to any questions, a year ago he sat in front of an audience and said that Mortensen would be breaking ground in the fourth quarter of 2017. I think none of us believed that would be possible. So we anticipated a December 31st groundbreaking, so this is
well ahead of time.
exceeds our expectations. So this, as I said, is the first new life science building. It is distinguished by the fact that it is privately owned, while Mail will be a tenant in it and a minor tenant, or partial tenant, I should say. It will be home to many other life science companies. And their marketing and tenant recruitment process is in full gear, and the design is underway, and this is a design build project, and groundbreaking again this afternoon. The site has already been secured and demolition has begun, so you can see that in the photograph that that they did not wait till today to begin, but the official event is today.
Great. Yeah, Mayor Ryback.
This is a slightly sensitive issue, but that shouldn't be too sensitive. But I think it's important to recognize that with Discovery Square, we're building a global brand. This is the most important building that we're building, and it's really important that we agree on what we call it, that we name it, that we brand it, and we keep doing that. Mm-hmm. I am an enormous fan of the Mortensen Company, and especially what they've done on this project. Mm-hmm. However, I don't think we should be calling this the Mortensen Project, and I've made that case to them too, and I think we all agree. This is Discovery Square, because we're not trying to build a brand for Mortensen, we're trying to build a brand that Discovery, in integration with the Mayo Clinic, is the single biggest catalyst that we have. So I know it seems like really in the weeds for me to be saying Discovery Square, Discovery Square, Discovery Square, but I do think we ought to stay to that and recognize that it's not about diminishing the phenomenal contribution Mortensen has made. It's about our real need to make sure that people all around the world understand there's a really remarkable discovery going on here.
Madam Chair, Mayor, I think you'll find that we all agree on that point, and that work is underway.
Great.
Sure.
Great. Mr. Campbell. What? He's gonna. Jim, I'm so sorry, but we can't hear you. Can you hear? You can obviously hear us. Just bear with us for a second. Can you guys? Yeah. We can see you fine and our volume is up, but we are having trouble with we can't, yeah. Poor Jim.
Would it be possible to call on a cell phone and just put that up to the...
We've tried that in the past and it's just a disaster.
Okay.
Hey, James, I'm going to try calling you back.
Yeah, okay. Jim, we're going to try to call you back.
Hi.
Yeah, I know. Best laid plans. We will come back to Mr. Campbell. Is there any other comment on this? Well, we all watch mesmerized. Yeah. Okay. We'll keep going, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, that sounds good. So any other questions on the status of the project, the 4 projects? We're going to go into now a status review of the public realm projects.
Thank you.
And we can come back to him if we catch him.
Yes, we'll come back to him.
Well, in addition to these 4 projects, the 4 private development projects.
We can see you, Jim, but we can't hear you. Okay, continue.
In addition to the 4 private projects that you have approved, you've also provided direction on addressing 4 other public realm projects. They are in the heart of the city district, the public realm of the heart of the city. And you've seen the presentation of the design, schematic design for Heart of the City. Our next steps that we've identified is that we are going to be integrating that project design, the Heart of the City project design, with Chateau Theater, the Wells Fargo initiative. This is a acquisition that's underway of the Wells Fargo, and the adjacent Titan Harbor Bay, or sometimes known as the Michael site development. We are also going to be identifying project priorities and phasing. You remember that it's a very big and robust and concept, and that we're gonna try to identify how to best phase it and develop a construction timetable, identifying and securing funding streams and a financing strategy so that the entire project doesn't fall on DMC for cost, and also to ensure there's a governance management and operations program so that once built, it will be maintained and programmed properly. We do have in the CIP budget preliminary authorization request from you to proceed with design, but we would come back to you before we moved ahead with that. That's Heart of the City. That's the public realm of Heart of the City. And Gary, if there's anything else you want to say about any of these, Chateau Theater.
Madam Chair?
Wait, yes, Mayor Ryback?
Just a question on Heart of the City. I think it's encouraging to sort of hear what I think was an inference that we're looking at ways of integrating that with adjacent developments so that the buildings and the space work together. That's exciting work. It's also work where I think it's really important to have a pretty strong advocate at the table for maintaining the public piece of that. Does that, I want to say we should encourage that, but I really hope that also comes back through here so that we can continue to make sure that we exercise the proper voice on the public place staying public.
Thank you. That would be the intent.
That's great. Jim, do you want to try one more time? We still can't hear him.
No.
Yep. Okay. Maybe, well. Okay. You guys can just continue.
Okay, Chateau Theater. Again, you authorized the acquisition of Chateau Theater. The city acquired this building in January of 2016. There is a plan that was created that's been presented to you as well for its reuse. Our next steps are to develop a strategy to diversify the capital funding sources. So the idea, again, that not all of the burden of this project, cost of this project would fall on DMC. To ensure sustainable ongoing management and programming and operations plan, again, similar to Heart of the City, the idea that we know that the building, once redeveloped, will be able to maintain and operate and program it. Like Heart of the City is the idea of developing relationships to adjacent development. And it's been suggested here that consider ideas for interim use and activation, and there have been some periodic uses of the facility. And again, we will be in the capital improvement budget recommending preliminary approval of proceeding with design. Again, we would not actually commence the design until we came back to you again for approval of that, but it's there as a placeholder.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Mayor Ryback.
One question I wanted to raise on this is if I could characterize what I consider to be two different visions for the theater. One is one that is very capital intensive with some exciting ideas about how to move the theater to have larger events, movable floor, et cetera, et cetera. Another would be to not make as major of a physical change to the interior of the building as much as to invest more in the programming of it. And I think those are two different approaches. I would characterize myself on the second piece of it at this point without having seen the other idea. I do think we ought to play that issue out before we move forward on an expensive capital project. If ultimately the case is made that we need to make those big changes to have things happening there, then obviously we should go forward. But I just think there's a difference of opinion at that point. I think we just have to have a open discussion on all of that before that happens. So when we vote on the capital today, are we moving down the road of that significant physical investment, or do we still have the opportunity to have that discussion of physical improvement versus programming?
I'll defer to Gary.
Yeah, you're not making any decision to move forward either with design or construction at this time. So that will totally come back to this board and also to the city council as well. They're not at that point yet either. So all of those things are open for discussion. One of the other things I was going to mention is we have looked into, as a way to moderate a bit the capital costs, into historic tax credits and new market tax credits as well. It may be eligible for both, so that would help with the capital costs. But all those decisions, this is basically in your budget for this project. You've authorized the acquisition cost previously. But as far as any further costs, they will come back to both this body and the city council. So you're completely open to making decisions on that yet. This is basically a placeholder in the 2018 budget and no more than that at this point.
Good, that's helpful. I see progress on the one strategy, which is to make those physical improvements to dramatically change the character. I don't see progress on coming forward with a solution that is not as capital intensive. You know, in my experience on entertainment, which is not deep, but I look at a Cedar Cultural Center, a Dakota, multiple other venues that are not, First Avenue, I guess, that are not super capital intensive, but put the resources, the Palace Theater, I guess, in St. Paul, to put more resource into programming. I don't see something on our plate on that, and I think it's the way we're laid out. It's relatively straightforward how we move forward on a capital project, but not necessarily on a programming. So I just want to put a marker down on that and say, for us to have that be an apples to oranges discussion where we decide which fruit we want, I guess that's the right way to say it, we have to figure out some way to get some option here that is about saying, we want to have something exciting happening every night there, but it doesn't mean we have to have a hydraulic floor moving back and forth. And I just characterized really exciting things for the chateau in a really unfair way. I didn't quite mean that to say it. There's two really good ways to do this. One is to do those major physical improvements. One is to focus on programming. And I just think we have to have both of them at the same level of maturity when we make that decision.
Yes, Ms. Reimer.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. To follow up on your points, we
And
appreciate
I just want to say, Jim, I'll come to you. I think we can hear you. Let's see. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to.
Not a problem.
I think we can. We're not. Okay. All right. Please continue.
Just wanted to add what's been discussed today. We would agree. There's that possibilities approach discussion that has to happen, and we're trying to shape up a meeting with our colleagues from the EDA and the council to start that conversation on both the capital, the operations, and maintenance. Our music director is here today, and there's a lot of interest in exactly what you're saying and what that balance looks like. So we would concur that those are discussions that have to happen. And as Gary said, really now we're just looking at the CIP to have those discussions and not make any final decisions.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
John can't get him.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell him? Why don't you tell him we're trying to call him?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could work.
Were you trying to call him and you didn't answer?
I was, although there's not Verizon service even when I call.
Oh. We don't have Verizon service, so maybe there's some sort of a, okay. Well, if somebody could, it would be great if somebody could just try to get in touch with we're trying to figure out how to get in touch with Mr. Campbell to at least have tell him we seem to be having some trouble with cell phone service or mobile service in the building, so. Okay, thank you very much, Cody. I want to just come back to this question of the heart of the city and Chateau Theater. I think it's really important what RT is raising, and I think that we can see models in other parts of the state where you have also good collaboration between a variety of performance arts spaces where they are working together on programming and to the benefit of all of the facilities rather than the competition of those facilities. And we ought to be looking at that because we think about these incredible theaters in other communities in southeastern Minnesota that are actually trying to solve exactly this same problem. Or kind of take advantage of the same opportunity, better way of putting it. And so I hope that you'll reach out to folks in Red Wing and Winona where these other great theaters are and see if there isn't some synergy there.
Can I make one other thing?
Yeah.
I mean, if you really think about how this project is trying to be catalytic to not just Rochester, but all over, think that if we could create a management and programming strategy in the Chateau Theater that could attract entertainment that could tour some of these other facilities in Red Wing and in Duluth and all these other places. You also are, an hour and a half from one of the great art centers in the world where there are attractions coming there that could be brought down here. That's very different than taking just an approach to physically what we can do to this building. But I think somehow we have to see if there's any interest in folks around that could be a subcommittee or a group or whatever, because if we do that, I think we have a great opportunity. I'm sorry to keep beating the same drum, but I would certainly be willing to help connect people with people who are knowledgeable in that area.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
Very good. Okay, continue. Thanks.
We've also been working in the St. Mary's Place area, and we have advanced a set of what we would call design concepts for St. Mary's Place. Is at a level of detail, not the level of detail that Heart of the City is at. Heart of the City is at what we call schematic design level. The St. Mary's Place work was really at much more of a conceptual level. And we have shared that work with City Council, and we will continue to share these concepts with upcoming projects in that district, including the redesign of 2nd Street itself and any private development that gets proposed or promoted. We can already see the impact of this set of concepts on the Lattice project, which was ahead of us in the sequence, but it sort of foreshadowed the intent that we had for the rest of the district. So already that new development is consistent with the concepts that we're showing for the rest of St. Mary's Place. We imagine prototyping or doing temporary demonstration of some of the project ideas. It's a technique that we're using here in Rochester to test out ideas, find out what works and what doesn't. We also have in the CIP before you a small amount of resources for one of the recommendations out of this, which is to improve the street or the district identity with potentially street banners or street furniture, so that we begin to signal this new gateway into Rochester. This is will end up being at a more of a, not exactly temporary installation, but it will get ahead of the final redesign of 2nd Street, for example, but we think that we can do some of this in the coming years so that we begin to set up this identity of the district.
Really good. That's great. Questions?
Gary?
Okay.
And then finally, Discovery Walk. Somewhat optimistic here. Discovery Walk is the geography, the term we're using for the geography of 2nd Avenue from Annenberg Plaza down to Soldiers Field. So we're really extending the heart of the city concepts south to Soldier Field on 2nd Avenue. It will coincide with the design process for 4th Street, which is where there is a sewer project going on, and the street itself will be redesigned. And schematic design we expect to be completed by the first quarter of 2018. And we have this design work in CIP as well.
I'm confident if the chair were here, she would allow me to make a quick comment. Thank you. I just want to just call out how important this work is, and I think both in this and St. Mary's Place, these were not things that were envisioned that deeply when we started this, and this is a really good example of turning a building into a place, and the connective tissue that links this then to Soldiers Field. And I just don't want this to go under the radar because it's really, really smart emerging work.
Thank you. I think when you are out there today for the groundbreaking, you will see firsthand how much redevelopment opportunity there is along the 2nd Avenue corridor. And as you know, the public realm as a catalyst for private development so often occurs. And what we have taken for granted as probably suboptimal use of land, I think will become optimized as we invest more in the public realm, and that's the intent with this.
Great. Thank you. I think we still don't have audio to Mr. Campbell, is that right? Yeah, we still don't have any audio. I'm so sorry, Jim. I think maybe we should just give it up and, yeah. Yeah. I think we'll just give it up, and I'm really sorry about that. Okay, next item is transportation update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Chair and members of the board, I'm not sure if this mic is on. There it comes.
Yep.
I'm here today on behalf of the transportation team to give you a brief update on the status of our team's efforts in looking at the various aspects of the transportation. My name is Beth Bartz. I'm with SRF Consulting, and I'm part of the transportation team that is working with the city. We don't have anything specifically before you for action today, but rather wanted to just give you a brief update in anticipation of coming forward with a recommendation for you in the first quarter of 2018, which will be a very robust recommendation that integrates the various layers of the transportation network that we are currently studying, and we hope we're in the process of developing that recommendation. We'll have many more details for you to come. But today I just wanted to give you some of the highlights that you have in regards to the packet that was included with the materials you received for the meeting today. So first I want to talk about parking. We have a team that's focused on using very complicated models to look at and assess the parking needs for the expected economic development and employee growth that will happen in downtown Rochester. We are looking at what we need for parking, both in terms of those downtown employees, but also patients and visitors to Mayo Clinic, as well as supporting the downtown businesses, the retail businesses, restaurants, and other visitors, such as those who are taking advantage of the facility we're in today. As we look at all those various uses, we estimate that 16,000 additional parking spaces will be needed in downtown, and we've separated those out into 3 geographic locations that you can see here represented on the graphic. We estimate we'll need about 7,000 spaces in downtown Rochester, and that's really divided up between 2 different groups. About 3,000 spaces for residential development. We fully expect that those parking spaces will be provided on the sites that are developed for residential, but about 4,000 new patient, visitor, and or retail parking spaces. And those will be developed as private development occurs within the boundaries of the DMC district. We'd love to put all 16,000 of those spaces downtown in terms of convenience for folks, but the downtown infrastructure simply won't allow for that many vehicles to enter the city and be parked. And additionally, those 16,000 spaces would encompass about 32 of the current 500 space parking facilities that you see today, and that would take up an awful lot of downtown land. So we're recommending that for downtown employees, we build approximately 6,000 to 7,000 spaces around the perimeter of downtown, and then figure out some good transportation measures to get those folks in and out of downtown at the beginning and end of their work shifts. And in addition, adding about 2,000 to 3,000 spaces in remote park and ride facilities, such as the park and ride facility you see at IBM. So that's one of our key findings at this point, and as we work through our recommendations for how those spaces will be structured and organized. Next, I just want to hit on some key findings for transit. Again, as we look at all of that activity in downtown, we look at the ways that people will want to get to downtown, including where those parking spaces are organized. We estimate that there is a market for a transit circulator of about 25,000 riders per day. That would include employees as well as patients and visitors. And we've talked about the 3 markets in the past that those 25,000 rides would serve, being the employee market, but also the just downtown activity circulator, as well as the transportation needs between the St. Mary's and Gonda campus of Mayo. We've started to look at some of what the estimated capital costs would be of the various transit modes that we've been looking at. About $90 million for a BRT type system, about $265 million for the tram type service that was recommended in the DMC plan, and about $490 million for an elevated system. We're looking at finalizing our analysis in regards to what transportation service will best serve those three markets. And I also want to note that the city has been working with IBM and Local Motors, who is the manufacturer of the Ollie autonomous vehicle, which is about a 10 to 15 person small shuttle type vehicle. They've teamed to look at a pilot program in downtown Rochester, serving some of those downtown circulation needs. So that's a pretty exciting opportunity. In terms of streets, we've been looking at the needs of Second Street in particular. Second Street serves a lot of our demands, both between the St. Mary's and Rochester campus, but it's also one of the key portals into downtown. And it's a corridor that many of our patients and their companions spend time on as they are staying at some of the homes for those patients that are focused on Second Street South. So we've been looking at how to best allocate that space for these various transportation needs. Again, it's a tight corridor, but we're also working with the St. Mary's Place efforts so that we can coordinate those efforts and bring them together. And you'll see that in the first quarter of 2018. We're also looking at creating a backbone of pedestrian streets through downtown, those streets that provide a little better pedestrian amenities, pedestrian facilities to really facilitate walking through the downtown, as well as some bicycle travel corridors that will look at various types of parking or biking facilities, whether they be protected bike lanes or bike boulevards, or simply just making those good bicycle connections so people can really use that as a transportation mode as well. We're connecting those out to the existing river trail systems that you find throughout the city, as well as a city loop that would connect all the various destinations identified in the DMC district. We are, as far as the city loop, we're also looking more specifically at route options throughout the city where the city loop should be located. We're looking at things in the roadway context, such as how wide is the right-of-way? How is the boulevard treated in that area? How many driveways do we have? What's the crossing safety, et cetera, so that we can really create a robust, high-amenity facility for pedestrians and bikers to use. And we are also doing that, again, in close coordination with some of the public realm efforts that we just heard a report about. Travel demand management, you may have heard we do have a committee made up of downtown stakeholders who are working to identify a transportation management framework. This would be an entity that would work with employers and other visitors to the city to provide those incentives for folks to park and provide the right parking rates and the right allocation of space in the right places to really best manage that resource in downtown. There are two pilot TDM efforts that have taken place, one with city employees and one with HGA architects employees, to try to test out, as we talked about, sort of prototyping some of those efforts to encourage folks to take transit instead of driving their car into work, and developing a menu of services that might entice employees to take advantage of those programs. There is an RFP that's currently out to identify a software development vendor who can develop an app or a software platform to make that menu of choices very easy to use for folks in the community. Last but not least, we are looking at some of the overall capital costs. So this would be taking into account not only transit, but the parking, city loop, et cetera. The four scenarios that we've been studying, those total capital cost ranges are about $400 million to up to $1 billion. We feel like our recommendation will be somewhere toward the middle of that range. And we're also looking at potential funding sources to fund those efforts as well. We've identified a number of public funding sources. What we're anticipating right now is there will need to be some public-private partnerships in order to fully fund the capital expenditures needed to realize this program. So in terms of next steps, we are working with city staff to complete our recommended hybrid. By the end of this month, in December, we'll be putting together our documentation and packaging of that recommendation, and then ready to roll it out to the city council, yourselves, and the public in the first quarter of 2018. So that's my presentation for this morning. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great. Yes, Councilmember Hickey.
Yeah, back on the topic of street use, and I've shared some of these comments with you before. With the bulleted materials provided for us, there's talk of repurposing streets. There's a mode shift, and it'll be coming to Rochester, but we want to provide people with more options. We don't want to restrict the options they have. So the mode shift should occur because people want to have a better opportunity. And in the interim, repurposing vehicle lanes either as bike lanes, both vehicle lanes and parking as bike lanes or dedicated transit lanes, I don't think that's the way to go, certainly in the near future. Again, over time, as these things develop, and if we've encouraged people for that mode shift, then that may be appropriate. But I would not see supporting repurposing vehicle lanes and parking at this time for bike lanes and transit or dedicated transit lanes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Ronnie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Beth, for a great overview. My question is, when might we see implementation plan and what might be included in that implementation plan?
Thank you, Ms. Rani. Once we have that hybrid, have an understanding of what we are building toward and have endorsement of that hybrid concept, we are looking to build an implementation plan that would not only look at financing, but also look at cash flow, phasing, which pieces make sense over time. Obviously, we're not going to need to build out that full recommended concept right away to meet needs that won't be in place until 2030 or 2040. So we will have a phasing recommendation as well as a financing recommendation that will go along with that recommended concept.
A follow-up question? Would that be prepared in the first quarter of 2018, or do you see beyond that? Ms. Bart.
We will likely have some information in regards to that the first quarter of 2018, but there will need to be some further details that are worked out after that time.
Thank you. Yep. Ms. Spear.
Are we including in this plan also an idea that had been floated around, but I haven't heard about it much lately, is the outer ring of cities, smaller cities like Byron, Pine Island, Chatfield, having park and rides out there where they could use this as an economic development tool. And what I'm suggesting is where, maybe they have a supermarket and a daycare along with maybe a large surface lot, and then people could meet there. They could take a bus or, some vehicle into downtown to get to work. Then when they came back, they'd have some amenities there. They could pick up their kids from the daycare or something like that. Have we worked with some of these smaller communities to see if there's any interest in that?
Commissioner Beer, we have not spoken with them directly, although we assume that a commuter bus type service similar to what's operated currently by the Rochester City Lines would continue and would likely expand in the future.
Yeah.
So we are anticipating that type of effort would also contribute to some of the transportation needs.
Okay, yeah, because I think that could be an economic development for some of these smaller cities, what we call bedroom communities around here. So thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Newman, did you want to add to that?
I just want to back up to Susan's question. The studies will wrap up in the first quarter of 2018, and then there is placeholder funding, kind of just to identify there will be some costs for the implementation planning. And so right now there's a limited amount of funding under projects 15, 17, and 18 in the CIP to get started on that process after the studies wrap up in the first quarter.
Thank you. Good, thank you. Mayor Ryback?
Sure. First, just a quick comment on, on Commissioner Beer's point, which I feel very strongly is a great opportunity for us. My super unofficial survey of where the bus stops are for the Mayo buses is almost all of them are outside of the main street downtown, and most of the places are a parking lot on the side of a town. That's a strategy. It's the easiest place to find parking, and it has the least positive impact on the the main street. You know, we don't have control over this, but I would sure argue that if there was a strategy of saying that those were landing on main streets in those smaller towns, and that there was some way to get a double bottom line, so somebody got off the bus and could actually shop or support a main street business, that would sure be great. So to the degree we can have an impact, I'm sure an advocate of it. Just on the transit plan in general, I think there's been significant progress, and I think one of the things that's been most significant is that we now have a really much better handle on what problem we're trying to solve and what opportunities we have with the number of people, where they're coming from, where the choke points are. And so the discussion over the past couple of months I have found much, much easier to navigate because we're getting that in place. So I really want to commend people for that. The second point is, I think under travel management, setting up the committee is a big piece of that. Doing that kind of work is great. I think specifically we want to thank Mayo for engaging in this discussion about how to encourage where their employees go. And we're, yeah, thank you. Give me just a second. Thank you very much. We're about to break ground on Discovery Square, which has less parking in it than a building like that normally would. That's a risk for Mayo, that's a risk for Mortensen, that's a risk for all of us. That's only going to work if we can do a game-changing transit strategy. And I think there are some really solid ideas on the table, and I know everybody's working real hard. I don't think we're quite there yet, and I just want to certainly say I'll continue to work hard on it. I think there's progress, but we're not quite there yet, and I want us to push pretty hard on that issue. I think the final point is there's a big disconnect between what we want to do and how much money we have. We don't have enough money to do what we want to do, and we still, I don't think, have that game-changing strategy. So when we say public-private partnership, I think we ought to specifically be saying that this body is openly shopping our partnership to the development community, that is bringing in these ideas, that if developers can integrate parking into that, and that can be part of our transit vision, that's probably the only way we're going to really pull this thing off. So I think we should put a pretty big partnership sign up and really reach out to the development community, you know, to me especially, opportunities along what I'd call the west coast of downtown, 52, where it comes in, and some of these places where those parking facilities are may depend in part on which developer wants to play ball with us. So I think that's really going to be important. We can't look at these and say, oh, good, let's just write a check for them. We don't have the money to do all this, so we're going to have to do a deal, and I think we should be shopping that now.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda is the EDA report.
Thank you.
Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Smith and board members. Thanks again for this opportunity. A couple of things. I first wanted to comment on and acknowledge the affordable housing comments also that Chair Smith noted. The EDA is very involved in the discussions, and I just wanted the board to also understand that there are several organizations and groups in this community that are championing this and very interested in moving this forward alongside of our effort. So it's not just DMC doing all of this, it's truly a community effort. So groups like Rochester Area Chamber, John Eischen with the Builders, DMC, other community groups, Mayo Clinic, everybody now is starting to get around the table and really address this and try to find solutions. The city, of course, is there. So,
Can I just jump in there?
yeah, in the county, sorry.
We just had the county HRA just had a retreat on Tuesday to talk about affordable housing and low-income housing, the whole housing crisis. And I want to echo what Lisa is saying. I mean, there's a lot of people working on this, Rochester Area Foundation, Mayo, Civic, and County. These are complex problems. I mean, there's not there's not an easy solution to this. They're complex problems. They are being worked on. I want to assure the public they are being worked on, but it takes time. It takes time and a lot of effort. What I don't want to get into is acrimony. I mean, we've got to work together to solve these problems. And I heard a little bit earlier in the meeting, a little bit of what I sensed as acrimony, and that's going to go nowhere. We need to work together with these things. I think we got the partners that can work together, but it takes time. So I'd just like to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. So our metrics dashboard, which Chair Smith mentioned earlier, we've got two plans in your packet. One is our comprehensive dashboard list. So that's basically the list that we're collecting a lot of data, and we worked with Wilder Foundation on this. And to your point earlier, Chair Smith, we believe that we have to collect all of this data initially. Maybe there's too much, maybe, but if we don't start it early, collect a lot early, we'll be wishing we would have done it earlier, or earlier in the process. So we've got the dashboard, and we always put that in your packets. What we have in front of you today, I want to just, oh, there's the clicker. Talk about the comprehensive dashboard, and this dashboard in front of you is really a higher level metrics that you can take a look at, and you'll be very interested in to see the progress. And our progress is measured every 5 years. If you recall, in the development plan and in the legislation, we said that every 5 years, this plan, believe it or not, needs to be refreshed. And we're actually refreshing it as we go, because the market's changing. Things are moving pretty quickly, and so we're going to continue to refresh that. The metrics document will help with that. We've done a couple of highlights on the screen in front of you. Each of the goals that you approved, these are the 5 goals that you approved at the beginning of this initiative in 2015 when you approved the development plan. These are our guide. This is the guide that we use when we build our work plan and when we use our metrics plan. And actually, it's been wonderfully helpful for us to keep us focused and to keep us on track in terms of the planning efforts that we are using. So we'll give you a snapshot of each goal. The first one is create a comprehensive strategic plan. It's been interesting for me to hear people talk about the plan that we approved in 2015, and it's a plan. And it was a big plan, and it was a 700-page plan, and it was very comprehensive. But to me, that's the starting line. That's where we start. And from there, many, many other plans and efforts and designs and discussions are happening. This gives you a glimpse of some of the things that we're measuring, in a sense, to move the initiative forward. So 2014 and 2015, that's when this development plan came forward. The UMR has also created their campus plan, and we work in tandem with them to make sure that that's integrated into our DMC plan. Sustainable energy is a high priority for us, and you'll start to see over the next couple of quarters and the next couple of meetings some of the great work that's coming out of our sustainability and energy work. 2016, the Discovery Square project plan came forward. Mayo Clinic does their 5-year plan, and again, we are integrating with that plan so that we're working together and we're all facing the same direction and learning from one another so we don't have to duplicate efforts. And then you, of course, have been discussing Chateau Theater proposal. 2017, just last year, we did our first DMC district design guidelines, which has already helped in discussions as projects are coming forward. The Heart of the City public realm and St. Mary's Place public realm you've just discussed. What you don't see on here, of course, is the transportation plan, because you're going to see that in 2018. So this first measure is basically helping us track all of the work that needs to happen to move the initiative forward in terms of planning and design. The second goal is leveraging the public investment to attract more than $5 billion in private investment. What we've often said, and what we're aiming for and the plan calls for, is $585 million of public investment is going to we're going to reach the $5.5 billion in private investment, and we often talked about a 1-to-10 ratio. So we've actually been using those numbers as we see these private projects come forward, and the public dollars are now starting to flow. And we believe that we're pretty much on track with that. We actually are seeing that some of our public infrastructure and operating costs are at about 8%. And we think we're probably at $450 million right now in private investment. So if you remember last year, $297 million was approved. So we feel like we're actually on track with this 10-to-1 ratio, and perhaps even a little bit better on that front. This is an example of some of the work that's happening behind the scenes to get to that far right box, if you will. So the DMC EDA and the city and other colleagues are really doing a lot of outreach to make sure that we are working as hard as we can to get out into the public, meaning local, regional, national, and international, so that we can drive business, we can drive investment in developers to this particular community. So you'll start to see the work in a funnel-like shape, that all of that work in terms of awareness and all the marketing work that we're doing really leads to often public engagements, speaking opportunities. We're now starting to target, after our first year of marketing, we're starting to do targeted marketing and targeted initiatives, particularly on the coastal areas for our Discovery Square. And here's an example. Between January and September, we've had 153 investor and developer meetings. Those meetings, of course, all don't turn out into, there'd be 153 projects, but they all really lead toward the projects as they move through the pipeline. On the right, you'll see basically where we're at to date. We're at 13% secured projects over our 20-year plan. We've got 5% of projects in the pipeline. And so in our first 2.5 years of progress, we have yet to see the 82% to complete the final. So I think we're making good progress. I mean, we feel like we're on track with the ratio, we're on track with our private investment, we're on track with jobs, which you'll see in a second. So this measurement, if you will, really has helped us to keep on track. You've seen this map. You'll see it forever for the next 20 years as we all sit here together for 20 years. And hopefully,
Maybe not.
That's a hint, you guys. Hopefully they'll all turn green and we'll be happy as can be. But this is really, of course, it's right. This is, of course, our tracking map, and 2018 will certainly look different as well. This is just an example of some of the targets that we are after. Right now, actual, we're at 1.7 square footage, and in the first 5 years, our aim is for 2.7 million. So again, we're on track, we're going in the right direction. You'll see on the right, that number on the left has now been broken down into sectors. So you'll get a sense of where we're at in the first 5 years in terms of office, retail, healthcare, life science, meeting space. We'll be tracking that regularly as well. There's a lot of talk in this community right now, of course, about apartments and housing and hotel units. So we wanted to give you a sense of where we're at with that. We put phase 1 and phase 2 together because some of the apartment units that are being built right now in phase 1 will bleed into phase 2. So you'll start to see what type of absorption rates we have there. And same with the hotel. I mean, one hotel has come through so far, and there's a lot of discussion about hotel, but you'll also be able to see here on the far side that we still have room for more discussion and more development in the hotel arena. Employment in Rochester, we broke our 30,000 goal over the next 20 years down to annual. Of course, it won't land 1,500 annually every year, but it'll give us a sense of what we're aiming for. And we feel like we're on track with that as well. You'll see that 2014 to 2015, we brought in about 1,500 new jobs in Rochester, and over 15 to 16, we were at about 1,800 new jobs. So again, we think the development is on track. And of course, we're only 2.5 years old, but the development is on track, and we really believe that our employment rates are on track for growth.
Lisa, I want to just note, I think this is a really important measure and a good sign of progress. And I also want to note that you guys are careful in your data to not suggest that all of these jobs can be attributed directly to the Destination Medical Center.
Right.
I mean, it's much more organic than that, and it's not possible to unknit
Exactly.
kind of the economic opportunity that's happening in this community. And it's so I just wanted to note that. And
Excellent point.
I also think it's important for us, not today, but in the more detailed metrics that we have to track, and I think we can do this, sort of where these jobs are, because of course we want to make sure that these are jobs that are living, I mean, I want to make sure they're living wage jobs that, that actually people can use to afford to live in this community.
Absolutely.
And so,
yeah, we'll try and track them in areas such as construction and healthcare jobs. And you're right, it's a little tricky to track all of this, and important to note, thank you for noting that DMC's not taking credit for all of this work. I mean, this is the true value of DMC in general, is that the community's coming together to do this work together and to grow this pie, if you will. Finally, we, in our goal 4 is, or not finally, we have one more goal. The goal 4 is to generate approximately 7 to 8 billion in new tax revenue. That new tax revenue includes personal income tax, state sales and use tax, city property tax, and county property and sales tax. This is a work in progress for us, but you'll get to see with the measures there that we're starting, the trend is going in the right direction again. And we're working with the city right now to best capture this particular goal. And we've got some work to do on it, but it's, at least it gives you a sense of the direction that we're heading. The last goal is what Chair Smith mentioned as one of our goals for 2018, is this experience goal, because when we started all of this DMC effort, and we talked a lot about experience, and we did a lot of research, and this was the research that we had done in one slide that really talks about where the gaps are in experience, whether it's be for those of us who live here or patients or visitors coming to Rochester. I wanted to point out a couple of the efforts that are moving forward with community organizations and DMC working together to really understand what this experience needs to be, and some of the programs and projects that can help to move it forward. There's an experience accreditation program that our Rochester Convention and Visitors Bureau is working with Mayo Clinic and DMC and other groups to really address the visitors and creating a bar, if you will, in the hospitality industry and the transportation industry for people that come to Rochester. It's an experience accreditation program that people are focusing on and paying attention to and joining, if you will, so that their hotel or their retail experience lives up to a particular standard that the community worked together on, and then we can start to market those places, if you will, as destination experiences. We're starting to get feedback, and we're doing surveys from people that are participating in this to see what kind of change it's made. There's an app that's being developed right now between various organizations as well that will help people when they come to this community understand wayfinding and where they can find a coffee shop and where they can find their hotels. It isn't in place right now, and we can tell that there's a gap in the application. So we've been working over the last few months on that experience app, and we feel like we'll bring that forward next year. We've done a lot of public prototyping in terms of public realm. Rochester Downtown Alliance has been a great partner for us. They're doing an event next week called the Air Glow event. And here's a really good example of what they're doing with us. Rochester Downtown Alliance is doing an event. They're talking to DMC and saying, what are you looking for in Heart of the City? What kind of experience do you want? What kind of activity is happening there? Can we test some things that are in your public realm plan for you during some of these events? So they're actually going to test some of the work that we've asked them to do in the event this weekend. We'll collect the data, and it's only going to help us to build a better Heart of the City. So it's events like that and partnerships like that that are starting to happen, and people have just been fabulous. And then finally, we're working very hard on the entrepreneur experience. We've got wonderful entrepreneurs in this community already, and we're starting to uncover more and more every day, and we're trying to create the experience that they're looking for, whether we bring new entrepreneurs to this community or people that already live here. What does that experience look like? What are they looking for? So we're going to start to track this and build programs that will help weave that fabric together for that goal.
Great. Yep, Mayor Ryback?
I really want to say how much I appreciate this, and I know this was a real goal of the chair, was to be able to have us focus on goals and then measure them, and so it's really great work. One thing that strikes me as I look at this is when we look at all of our goals, there's one thing that because of the change in the marketplace, we may want to think about putting on there. When I look at this goal 3 and I look at the job growth, that's really exciting, but increasingly as a worker shortage comes up, we've got to somehow figure out whether we have the workers trained and ready for this, because if you really look at sort of an analysis of what could slow us down, it's having trained workers ready for the jobs that are coming up. And I don't pretend to have an idea how to get our heads around whether the community has that right now or not. But I think somehow as we set the goals for the next year, we should think about where available workforce and training of the workforce comes into play here.
Yep.
It's also really hard to figure out because is it just the talent shed of Rochester or southern Minnesota or what? But somehow workforce, I think maybe this illustrates to me needs to put in here a little more.
Can I just say, Mayor Rabeck, I really appreciate that. You know, overall, statewide, this is an issue of extreme importance. The state demographer tells us that we'll be about 100,000 people short by 2020 of people ready to fill the jobs that are being created by organizations like those in Rochester. So, and it's why I actually think that the housing question is so important,
Right.
because if you, this is also a statewide challenge. If you don't have a place to live, then you can't really work in that community, and it fuels this big challenge that we have. So I would suggest that this be something that we spend a lot of time on over the next year, and that we have lots of resources with the not only here in this community, because I know you guys, you know, those of you who are in local government and county government are thinking about this constantly, but there's also a lot of people thinking about it at the state level.
I really like the idea of adding it somehow to that employment goal, because we've been talking about, there's not a day that goes by that we don't talk about workforce and how we're getting it and who we're partnering with. I mean, education's a great example. We're partnering with education to say, they're saying, DMC, what do you need? What kind of jobs do you need? And let us help you create the curriculum to feed the pipeline for that. High schools are involved. Our building community is involved. So I like the idea of us adding that workforce component to one of our measures. So we'll give some thought to that.
Councilmember Hickey?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for the update. I was going to tell you, I really like the development goal dashboard. I mean, I think it's important to get the story out, because there's even people in Rochester that really still some have questioned, you know, what kind of progress are we seeing with all this effort on the DMC? So I think this is exactly the right approach, lay out those goals and then measure our success against those goals. The broader metrics dashboard I've shared with you, I find that less useful. Things that we can only indirectly influence, which kind of just went through the budget process, and it's, you know, with limited dollars and staff resources, I think it's important to really focus on what we're doing and measure that success and get that story out. So that's my thoughts on this. I really like the developmental goal dashboard, and I really think that's where we should be putting our focus.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, colleagues, I want to make sure we don't get too far behind in our meeting time. Is there any other comments on this? Great. Seeing none, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have this be on our agenda at the end of the year. The next item on our agenda is the DMCC funding request, and I think we're going to, first of all, I want to just thank our board members who have reviewed the budget and really dug into the details of this, particularly Councilmember Hickey and Mike Doherty and Jim Campbell and Jim Beer, our treasurer. And other board members have had a chance to be briefed on this and have an opportunity to ask questions as well. So maybe I want to just invite, does anybody who's been on that subgroup want to just tell us a little bit about kind of how you approach this? I think that might be helpful as a starting point. Jim, do you want to take that as our?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We met several times with the EDA. That's been quite a work in progress. There's a lot of numbers to go through and crunch. I won't bore you by going through all the numbers, but I'd like to, again, thank the subcommittee, Mr. Doherty, Mr. Hickey, and everyone that, I'm sure I missed somebody that served on that subcommittee. It's been fabulous. I guess for each budget, I would like to turn over to, who developed that budget and let them talk about it a little bit. The first, we have the DMCC budget, and Kathleen, would you like to handle that?
Sure, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beer, the DMCC budget is before you, and it reflects a $100,000 reduction from the budget the budget that was approved in 2017. And it's mainly professional services, insurance, legal, audit, anything else that the DMCC board needs in terms of a professional service.
Thank you.
I guess one thing I'll add, a note, again, that's a $100,000 decrease. Usually you don't hear decrease in these budgets, but as our, as our group meets, one thing we might want to put in is a little bit better on the Skype program, apparently, because that hasn't worked so well lately, but we're going to get that figured out next time. I'm going to make that a personal investment. The EDA budget work plan, Lisa, could you maybe possibly go over that
so
for us?
thank you for the help with that. Also, we've been working with the city on our EDA budget, and we came to I think a good place. We are about 4.7% below budget from last year's budget. And we've tightened our work. We're still focusing on economic development, which of course we need to do. And Mayo Clinic also contributed. Remember, Mayo Clinic contributes to the EDA budget also, and they brought their budget in approximately 36% above last year's contribution. So I feel like we're in very good shape. We've got a tight budget. We've got a lot of work to do. Our work plan, the work group also went through the work plan and approved that also. So that was helpful. So now we've got our work to do, our budget serving up to that, Mayo Clinic's contribution as well, and I believe we're in good shape.
Is there any addition, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Jim.
no.
I wanted to just see if anybody wanted to pause, if there's any kind of other questions or comments about the DMCC budget or the EDA budget? No, Mike? Okay. Yeah, Councilmember Hickey?
Yeah, I'll just say, budgets are always hard discussions. I mean, we have limited dollars to accomplish all the goals that we want to do. But I think the process, just the city and the EDA staff, just the good communication, I think really helped us get through to a good ending point. So I just think that level of cooperation was really important.
Thank you.
Right. Well, I'd like to just note, put a little finer point on the contribution that Mayo Clinic is making to this, to these two operating budgets. As Lisa said, the Mayo Clinic contribution has gone up 36%, so they're contributing $1.3 million to the operating budget. I also like to remind you guys that when you think about the money we're spending, our operating costs, administrative costs are a very, very small portion. I think I saw 1%, which is extremely unusual. The other thing I think we're seeing here is that as we now have been doing this for a few years, we have a better understanding about how much things cost, and that is helping to drive, I think we have been maybe conservative in making sure that we didn't go over budget, and now that we have more experience under our belt, we're able to bring those costs down, and you don't see that a lot in either the public sector or the private sector, but you guys are accomplishing it here, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we could go over the CIP.
Right.
Lisa, are you handling
Yeah,
that? Or
so
is Patrick? I think
Patrick and
Patrick's-
Gary will probably work through this. We've got a couple of high-level slides just to share the CIP process and give you a sense of what's in the CIP at the highest level, which has been very helpful for us.
So in your booklet is the big pull-out sheet. So it's the spreadsheet that lists all of the 31 projects that are being presented for request today. Somebody asked that I remind everybody of the total amount of DMC funding and where it comes from. And so I just have this simple graphic to help as a reminder. This $585 million comes from several different sources, each of which has their own conditions associated with it and relationship to other sources. So generally what we're talking about are really two major buckets, being public infrastructure and transit and transportation. So I wanted to just share that as a refresher if necessary. So the capital improvement budget in front of you today, it shows 2018 through 2022, and we're asking for action on items found in 2018. The items in 2019 through 2022 are really more of a look ahead or an anticipation. And they fall into one of these 5 categories: streets and sewers, transportation, public realm, operations, and private development. There are 31 initiatives, and it totals a little over $22 million. And those 31 initiatives, rather, there are 12 that we're asking for final approval with a caveat on a couple of them, 8 that are not final and must return to DMC before any money is actually spent, and 11 of them there is actually no action required because either action had taken place in a prior year or they are placeholders. And I have
Patrick?
footnote, yes.
I'd just like to jump in here and for everybody listening at home too, I'm always one of those listening at home people. Again, the state money, the thing that we need to, with this state money is, it's not released until Mayo and the private metrics are met. So this state money, this $585 million, those chunks of money do not get released until private, Mayo and private investment money is spent. That's unusual. The government is not, the state government is not giving us money until metrics are spent. That's one point. The CIP, the 12 projects that are up there, those are for things that are very non-sexy. A lot of those projects right there are for sewer mains that need to be relocated. Those type of things. We could sit here, but we don't have the time to go through those projects 4, 5, 8, 9 ad hoc, but most of them are very non-sexy projects, but they need to be done to make, Discovery Square, Titan project, all these things happen. They're things like sewer projects. There's, I think, 4 or 5 sewer projects on there. And I guess
Miss Ronnie might take exception that sewer projects are not sexy.
For the record.
But, and then back to what Mayor Rybeck was talking about, like the Chateau money that we may or may not spend, that's in the 8. Those things that we have talked about today they're not final. They need to come back to the DMCC. So just so everybody understands how these buckets work. I don't know if I've done a good job of explaining that, but I feel as a treasurer it's important that I try and maybe explain it a little further. Thank you. Sorry, Patrick.
Comment on that? Yes, and then I think Mr. Doherty would like to speak. You go.
And I just would like to point out of that $585 million, it was referred to earlier that Mayo would receive some of those funds. No. None of this money goes to the Mayo Clinic. And I'll just add, as far as our budget ended up, Mayo was very generous in helping us reach a solution to finish the budget, and I thank them for that.
Ms. Ronnie, thank you, Mike.
Like Mr. Sieb said, I think it's a matter of opinion whether sewer projects are non-sexy. It's like doing sewer projects and roadway projects are necessary first steps. Otherwise, you're going to have congestion. You're going to have toilets that back up. Those are not sexy.
I
think we can agree on that.
Let's get that in a minute.
So it's like Field of Dreams. Once you build it, it'll come. In the meantime, there's going to be a lot of capacity. So.
Thank you. I think you might want to call for a vote after
Yeah,
that.
let it go.
So, thank you for the color commentary.
This could spin out of control
Mm-hmm.
quickly.
It's also worth noting that of the $22 million that's being proposed, 18 million of it is DMC resources from the sources of state, county, and city, and there's an additional 3.25 million coming from other city utility funds. So and Gary may want to talk about the strategy for matching some of the DMC money with other city resources, but it's important to note that our 18 million, the 18 million that you will be authorizing leverages another 3.2 million of other city resources.
Most of my comments Jim already took on the CIP. On some of the city utility sewer projects, we wouldn't be putting those projects in at this time for, individual buildings, but we're really creating capacity for the whole development. And so basically, we're doing some major lines that will create capacity for all of Discovery Square and some of these other areas. And in those cases, we would have been doing those many years in the future, but so we'll share those 50% coming out of the city utility funds, for which we won't get credit towards our DMC costs, because we think that's a local benefit. The other 50% would come from either the DMC sales tax or from the state sales tax. So we think that's a fair way of approaching those. I would note that the projects are, if you think where the projects are, there's some in the heart of the city, some in Discovery Square, some in the waterfront, some at St. Mary's Place. They're all over. And it shows the tremendous growth, I think, that is being generated by the DMC and the good job that you've done and the DMC EDA has done as well to get a lot of projects going. Because from my perspective, we have either more projects, only a few started, but we have more in the pipeline than I can recall in the last 30 plus years that I've been working here. So that growth has been terrific. I appreciate Jim noting that there's quite a number of projects that will come back to this board for approval and are really just no more than placeholders in this process. I won't list all of those. He mentioned the Heart of the City and the Chateau, Discovery Walk, and then also the scope of work for continuing on the various studies. That will also come back to you. Once those studies are completed, then we'll determine how to go forward on that implementation planning. Some of those numbers may change because they're kind of placeholder numbers, but I think you've pretty well covered it. If you don't have any questions for me, I think that's about the only comments in addition to the ones already made.
Gary, do you want to just note that there are some projects that are being approved today that will still be reviewed by the executive committee if necessary?
Right. There's a couple of the projects that are like the street on 4th Street, for example. Your board and the EDA would have a great interest in how that is designed. Because of the meeting schedule and the tight time frame to get those done for getting the building open or some buildings up, we'll work those through the DMC, EDA, and the executive committee of the board, so they also have input into that whole process. Because in some cases we won't be able to time those to hit a specific meeting because you meet quarterly, and as you know, with construction projects, they can sometimes go over. And we certainly don't want to run into that situation, particularly with the Discovery Square building, for one.
Great.
So then just quickly, the distribution of that, oops, I guess we lost our percentages. The distribution of the $21 million, you can see by the size of the slices of the pie that streets and sewers and transportation represent probably about 60% of the total public realm, and operations, a smaller percentage. And then, again, the category streets and sewers, $8 million for street and sewer improvements. This illustration just shows that there is a master plan for improvements, and that the $8 million that's being proposed today will help chip away at those in a very significant way, and for the reasons that we've talked about and identified already in order to allow for the growth that we're anticipating. $6.3 million of the $21 million is for transit and transportation to complete the integrated transit studies and to initiate some projects. All of those projects will come back to you, but there is some placeholder to begin actually implementing some of the transit work in 2018. Public realm, we've talked about all of these: Heart of the City design, Chateau design, Discovery Walk design, and St. Mary's Place potential banners and identity. And then finally, the operating costs, which you've already discussed. So that's a recap and of how the capital improvement program fits together with the goals and the priorities of this board. And I think as Gary would respond to any questions you have about any of the line items, if you have those.
Any questions, folks? No?
You looking for a motion?
Not yet. We've got to talk about the working capital. Leading into the working capital, you have on page 75, you have a working capital. Again, for everybody listening at home, working capital is just some cash in the bank so we can pay the bills as they come and go. The amount in your packet is $50,000. I think we're going to move that up to $100,000 just because we have so much cash coming in and out. We need to be able to pay the bills and to have a comfortable room. I would strike that and put that at 100,000.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Commissioner Beer?
Yes.
The amount for the EDA is correct. It is $50,000.
Okay.
It's the amount for the DMCC that is, it says $500. It should be amended to say $1,000.
Okay, well, again, I thank you for keeping
Thank you,
me
Ms.
on
Lamb.
track, Kathleen. And with that, unless there's any other questions, now we're looking for a motion.
You got it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
as amended? The resolution as amended should
Resolution
say
as amended?
$1,000
As
in
amended.
terms of the working capital loan for the DMCC.
Yes. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much to everyone for your work on this. Colleagues, we just have a few additional almost housekeeping issues that we need to take care of. And the next one, which you can do quickly, is DMCC insurance. Kathleen, would you just describe this to us?
Madam Chair, every year, the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, through whom the DMCC obtains its insurance, requires the board to elect whether to waive or not to waive the statutory limits on tort liability. And the strong recommendation is that this board elects not to waive the statutory limits on tort liability.
Okay. Is there any question about that?
So there needs to be a motion on that.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next item is the year-to-date budget update.
Again, as your treasurer, I can go over this. It's in our packet, a lot of boring numbers. The bottom
For a
line.
treasurer, you're not.
He's asking about his job.
Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
That's okay, I'm used to it. But we're on track. You know, we've spent, I forget, we've got about 25% of our budget remaining. We're on track. The numbers look good. I know everybody's in a hurry, so unless there's questions.
Seeing none? All right. The next item is Resolution C, which is approval of our 2018 regular meeting schedule. We need a motion to approve our schedule for next year. This schedule, as I understand it, has been gone through with all of our various complicated calendars, and it works. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. The next regular meeting will be March 22nd at 9:30 a.m. I will be 60 by then.
Well,
Oh, youngster.
Yes.
yeah, some of us are more mature than others.
The next executive committee meeting will be February 8th, and I will just remind everybody that we reserve the right to call a special meeting if we need to. We will keep you posted and do our best to coordinate that with all of your schedules. Seeing any further questions, comments, cantankerous remarks? Seeing none, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Everyone wants to make